Hey Denchbags, what's going on? It's Landon Remixes here, and welcome to my review of the third studio album from the vocalist and producer Lido. This one is called Everything. You can say this is his debut album if you really want to, just because this is the first full-length album he's released under the moniker Lido. But technically I think this is his third because he released two albums prior to this under virtually the same name, Lido. Pretty Girls in Gray Sweaters in 2012 and Battle Poetry in 2013. Some of his work under Lido even included his signature 4-note tag, which is included in most of his originals and remixes as Lido. You can actually see that 4-note tag right here. It's on the cover of his I Love You EP, which was his debut EP under the moniker Lido. I love that EP a lot, hence why it's on my vinyl wall with some of my all-time favorite EPs and albums. But I'm gonna be real, Everything completely blows all of his former work, including the I Love You EP, out of the park. Everything is arguably the most dynamic album I've heard in my entire life, and definitely the most dynamic in electronic music. You guys know I loved Skin by Flume, but in terms of future bass, this one is on another level entirely. Definitely not to take away from everything Skin was, but this album just hits at a lot of points that that one didn't. This album has a short but packed guest list, including Vic Mensa, Halsey, Jaden Smith, and Cashmere Cat. I think the two most important guest appearances to take note of on this thing are definitely Halsey and Jaden Smith, especially because Halsey and Lido dated, and then on top of that, I think a good chunk of the lyrics on this album are aimed at her. Lido was actually the executive producer and in large part the producer of Halsey's debut album Badlands as well, so her appearances on this one definitely make a lot of sense. Generally, her appearances on this thing are dialogue, whether it's her talking or whispering everything. On top of that, she also dropped some auto-tune vocals on the outro of the new version of Crazy. Crazy was the absolutely huge first single from this album, and it was accompanied by an absolutely insane music video. Literally every time I hear this song now, I think of the music video just because of how nuts it is. If you haven't seen it yet, I'm actually going to link that music video in the description so you guys can check it out for yourself because it's just nuts. This version is probably going to take me a long time to get used to just because it's so distinctively different from the single mix of this. Besides the song's master itself, which makes the levels fit a lot better with the rest of the album. So you guys might remember in a few of my reviews how I've mentioned that I'm really tired of people using the Jack U pluck. Well, be careful what you wish for, because I'm honestly really missing it when it comes to Crazy. Lido completely stripped the pluck, and now there are large parts of the song that sound almost half empty without it. Other than that, I really don't have a lot of complaints about this version of the song. Of those, I think the best addition is the track's gorgeous 1-minute long piano outro. There are a couple other small tweaks that Lido made, like adding an electric guitar into the track, which I really liked. There's literally only one other complaint I have in this entire album, and that's on the track So Cold, which resamples some of the vocals on Crazy, which say I do lie, yeah I do lie. And I really just don't think those vocals work over the really heavy bassy portions of that track. Although I think those vocals might have been in because this track is possibly a prelude to Crazy. But let's be real, each track in this thing kind of feels like a prelude to the next track throughout the entire thing. All topping off with Tell Me How to Feel, which feels like the album's recap story. Mostly because it samples vocals from all across the album, this track makes an awesome closer. But let's get back to dynamics and flow. In terms of flow, this album is also easily one of the best I've ever heard. The first half is a lot more instrumental and production centered, while the second half is a lot more vocal centered. Each of these songs just flow so well into each other, especially the couple tracks that include Jaden Smith, which come back to back. It's great. I don't think there was a single point on this album where I thought any of the transitions sounded awkward or anything. Everything sounds very natural and flows together very cleanly. I talked briefly about dynamics at the beginning of this review. Let me get a little bit more in depth about what I mean about that. Catharsis, the album's intro, is a really good example of this. It almost seemed like Lido cared more about the emotional aspect of this album rather than making this thing have a perfect mix. This is clearly represented by the track's opening dialogue, where you can tell that Halsey isn't speaking directly into the microphone. And then she does, but then Lido tells her to speak to him rather than the microphone. Another thing that I mean by dynamics is that I can practically see the sheet music of these tracks flowing through my mind when I listen through this album. On tracks like Crazy and Murder, we get these big, trappy fortissimo drops that are immediately followed by soft pianissimo outros. My favorite outro on this album actually isn't on Crazy, it's on Catharsis, which has that same creepy, out-of-key saxophone that Kendrick Lamar had on a lot of To Pimp a Butterfly. I'd even go as far as to say that this album is the To Pimp a Butterfly of electronic music. It's that good. One last thing about this album, and it's again in terms of dynamics, it's on the song You Lost Your Keys, and this song is very interesting because the piano track of this thing is very surrounding, coming from all sides. Meanwhile, Lido's vocals are coming very softly and dry and slightly to the left, sounding very very odd with the mix of the piano and his vocals, but it's really cool. I've never heard something like this before, and the same can be said about the majority of this album. This thing is a beautiful 360-degree experience, and I would definitely suggest it to anyone looking for something tasty. I was originally going to give this one a solid 9, but after doing some thinking, I know I want to place this one on another level than Flume and Illenium's albums this year, so a light 9.5 it is. As always, I have the Spotify link in the description so you guys can go check it out for yourself, and I definitely would suggest that you do. Anyway, I'm Landon Remixes, this album is everything, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.